Hello, and welcome to Distant Echoes, special episode 2, Zozobra with Raymond Sandoval. I'm a firm believer that a good telling of history isn't just about the events. It's not just in 1598 Oñate founded New Mexico, and then in 1610 Santa Fe was founded. It's also the stories people tell, the holidays they celebrate. History is a study of the past, what happened and why it happened. People are molded by their culture, and that affects the decisions they make. Without some understanding of their culture, you can only answer the first half of that statement, the what happened. With an understanding of the culture, you can better understand the why. This is the first of many special episodes I have planned, looking at different aspects that shape people's culture, be it holidays, ghost stories, witch crazes, literature, and more. The goal is to present extra information that may not be needed to talk about what happened, but may provide insight into why it happened. With that out of the way, let's begin talking about Zozobra.
Every year over Labor Day weekend, a 50-foot marionette rises above Santa Fe's Fort Marcy Park. This marionette, Zozobra, or Old Man Gloom, is then set ablaze, burning thousands of shredded pieces of paper known as glooms, containing everything from divorce paperwork to paid-off mortgages. The burning of these glooms is to be a release of these sorrows and troubles from the past years. This episode will contain 2 parts. First, a short history of the event that I compiled during my research, and then second, an interview I had with Raymond Sandoval to answer some listener questions you all submitted.
Launching straight into the history, first Zozobra took place in 1924, being created by William Howard Schuster Jr. for a private party of Los Cinco Pintores. Los Cinco Pintores was a group of artists in Santa Fe. Basically, these 5 artists would do their thing making art and would help support each other. They were not like the artist colonies of Georgia O'Keeffe with a communal lifestyle. Instead, it was more like a group of friends. First burning of Zozobra, a 6-foot effigy was burned in Schuster's backyard. The Burn Zozobra website, the landing page for the event today, and linked in the show notes, cites an article in the Santa Fe New Mexican that describes the first public burning of Zozobra in 1926 as such. Quote, following Vespers at the cathedral, a long procession headed by the Conquistadores band marched to the vacant space back of the city hall, where Zozobra, a hideous effigy figure 20 feet high, produced by the magic wand of Will Schuster, stood in ghastly silence, illuminated by weird green fires, while the band played a funeral march. A group of Kiwanins in black robes and hoods stole around the figure, 4 others seated before the green fires. When city attorney Jack Kennedy, on behalf of the absent mayor, solemnly uttered the death sentence of Zozobra, with Isidoro Armijo as interpreter, fired several revolver shots at the monster. The green fires changed to red. The surrounding ring of bonfires were ignited. Red fires blazed at the foot of the figure, and a match was applied to its base, the fire leaping into a column of many-colored flames. As it burned and the encircling fires blazed brighter, there was a staccato of exploding fireworks from the figure, and round about, throwing off their black robes, the spectators emerged in gala costumes, joining an invading army of bright-hued harlequins with torches in a dance around the fires as the band struck up La Cucaracha. The crowd then marched back between bonfires, lining the streets to the armory. The big baile was on. It brought out the biggest crowd of native merrymakers seen here for years. End quote. Schuster would cite the Yaqui tradition of burning an effigy of Judas during Holy Week. Despite this influence, Schuster was always clear that Zozobra was not religious and was apolitical. Schuster and a friend, E. Dana Johnson, would work to come up with the name Zozobra, which, depending on how you translate it, means anxiety, anguish, or gloom. Jacques Cartier, a former New York City ballet dancer, would come up with the idea of the fire spirit. This appears to have come about sometime in the early 1930s. Cartier would perform the role of the first fire spirit before passing on the role in 1970. Glooms are much more formal than they probably used to be. The event has always been a release of sorrow. A natural extension of that is the burning of your troubles in written form. Incorporating them into the event would not have been difficult. In 1963, the Kiwanis Club of Santa Fe began to take over the event, with Schuster signing over all the rights in June 1964. From there, Zozobra has continued under the club's supervision to the writing of this episode in 2024, marking the 100th Zozobra. The date the event is supposed to take place on has shifted around a bit over the years. It used to take place during Santa Fe's annual fiesta, something we'll talk about in a future episode. But due to an incident happening the same night, Santa Fe Police Department determined it was unable to support both events. Thus, Zozobra was moved to a weeknight. Due to it being on a weeknight, though, attendance began to drop off. Someone had the good idea to move it to Labor Day weekend, right before the start of the Fiesta de Santa Fe, which allowed for more people to be able to attend the event. The COVID pandemic also made things more difficult. especially for having an event. So, Zozobra was streamed via a local ABC affiliate, KOAT. I've linked the video of the 2020 stream in the show notes. To celebrate the 100th anniversary of the event, folks organizing the event have spent the past decade, from 2014 to 2024, theming Zozobra around the decades from the 1920s onwards. Instead of the traditional white suit with black bow ties Zozobra has worn, they've picked notable outfits from that time. When I first started researching this episode, I had some additional questions I was unable to find answers to. Doing some digging on the internet, I was able to reach out to the local Kiwanis Club branch for Santa Fe. They suggested I reach out to Raymond Sandoval, the event chair. After some email traffic back and forth with their press liaison to answer these questions, they were gracious enough to agree to make an appearance on the show to answer some of your questions. The audio you're about to hear, though, is actually the second time I sat down to chat with Ray. First time, due to some technical difficulties on my side, only my audio was recorded and none of Ray's. Luckily, there was enough room in Ray's schedule so that we could try again, and I'm very thankful that he was willing to sit down with us a second time.
So it's been raining so crazy here, which we're just not used to, right?
Lucky
so like
you.
we have monsoons, but it's like in the past it's been like 4 o'clock they come, it rains for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And so what's weird is that we're having monsoons, but it's at night, and it's just like hours of drenching rain. And so my allergy, I've never had allergies in July, and it's just crazy.
Lucky you. I'm allergic to both chamisa and juniper, so growing up it was spring to fall.
Yeah.
I just was congested. But yeah, that is bizarre for the monsoon.
Yeah, it is weird. Let me turn off all of my little things that are going to make noise. Give me 1 second.
No rush.
That way we don't get interrupted. Okay.
All right, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, I'll just launch into it. I'm going to use a lot of the same questions I asked you last time, but I had some time to think on some of them too, so.
There you go, right?
Yeah. But like last time, let's just get started with kind of your background. How did you get involved with Zozobra? You know, why am I talking to you today, basically?
Yeah, exactly. So my name's Ray Sandoval. I have the awesome privilege of being the Zozobra event chairman for the Kiwanis Club of Santa Fe. And I guess, I kind of call it, a love affair with a monster. And my love affair began really early. I remember that I was probably, 3, 4 years old, and big Hispanic family in Santa Fe. And so our parents used to take turns on taking all the cousins and all the kids to different events. And it was my parents' turn to take us to Zozobra. And so I remember walking into the field and seeing this towering monster, with yellow hair and just kind of standing there. And I was just kind of enthralled by it. And the night went on and the lights went out and Zozobra started to move. And I was like, oh my God, like he's moving. And I remember my cousins, they like grabbed my dad's legs and they would look, they wouldn't look at Zozobra and they were screaming and hollering. And I remember looking down to my dad had put me on his shoulders at that point and looking down at my older cousins thinking, people are crazy. Like, this is awesome. And so, the pageantry, the dancers, the fireworks, everything came out. And then Zozobra started on fire and he burnt and fell down. And I remember the lights coming on and people being happy and dancing. And my cousins at that point were cheering and hooting and hollering. And I was literally in tears for our fallen boogeyman. And my mom was like, what's wrong? And I was like, they burned Zozobra. And ever since then, I think we've had this weird connection between me and our little famous monster.
Yeah, I mean, even the second time around here, it's still a great story. From there, if I remember correctly, you said you kind of tried to get him to come to your school, right? You mind going into that?
A couple of years later, landed up in kindergarten, and one of the things that the teacher explains is that you can have folks come to show and tell. And so I remember couldn't focus the rest of the day because I knew exactly what I wanted to do for show and tell. So I ran home, and when you went to Zozobra, you used to get these postcards. And on the back, it had the Kiwanis International logo and talked about the fact that Zozobra was part of the Kiwanis Club of Santa Fe. And so I remember running home. I got my postcard off my wall and flipped it over. And, back then we didn't have the internet. So went to the white pages and thank God it spelled Kiwanis because I still get Kiwanis wrong even today. And went through the white pages and I found a listing for Kiwanis. So I call the number and I'm like, hi, my name's Ray Sandoval and I'd like you to come to my school. And Griff Dodge, who was then the secretary of the Kiwanis Club, answers the phone and, in this very stern voice says, people make, arrangements for us to come to their schools to talk about Zozobra months in advance. You can't just call up and expect us to come the next day. And I think he heard the deflation in my voice from being excited to just, I'm sorry, I didn't know how this works and so forth. And so I'm getting ready to hang up and I've apologized. And he says, wait. He goes, we had a cancellation for tomorrow. So, what's your school? We'll show up. So I tell them what school I'm at. And the next day they show up and they had a slide projector. And not only did Griff Dodge show up, but Harold Gans showed up, who was the voice of Zozobra. And, and Harold was always in the newspaper when we were younger. And so for me, this is like meeting, like a rock star, to meet the voice of Zozobra. And, at the end of the presentation, the teacher told me to go up and thank them. And so I did and offered to help them carry out the little model of Zozobra that they had and the little projector. And, as we're walking out to their car, I asked, can I come help build Zozobra? And they look at me and they're like, well, you're too young. And I think, my face just kind of crumbled. And so Griff Dodge walks back over. He must have had a soft spot in his heart for kids. And he said, we're stuffing Zozobra tonight, and it's usually just high schoolers. He goes, but if I write down the address, as long as you promise to behave and you bring your parents so they can watch you, I don't see any harm in it. So he did that, and I ran home and asked my parents if they could take me, and they said yes. And so we walked into the warehouse, and I remember just thinking that, like, there was so much commotion and people were moving everywhere, and Zozobra was kind of laying down, and so it was like all this activity. And I remember thinking, man, this must be what like the North Pole looks like right before Christmas, and so it just kind of started that way where I gravitated towards Zozobra's head. And Harold was not only the voice, he was also the gentleman that built Zozobra's face and his head. And of course, that's the most interesting part of the art, and so people would kind of flock. And so what I'd watch happening is that Harold would grab a tool and go and fasten, cloth or paper, and then he'd put the tool down and he'd walk away and he'd go tell, somebody in the crowd this story. And Harold was phenomenal. He would tell you these 20-minute stories and you wouldn't get bored. He was just kind of that folksy kind of guy who had great sense of humor, could really captivate an audience while he was telling a story. But then the 20 minutes would pass, and then he would go and look for the tool, and he couldn't find where he had put down the tool, because he was getting a little bit older at this time. And so I thought, eureka, this is my opportunity. So I waited till the next time that he fastened something, he put down the tool, and as he walked to go tell somebody a story, I went and I grabbed the tool, and I patiently waited till he finished the story. And when he finished the story, I put the tool up with a big smile, and I remember, man, he just grabbed it right out of my hand with force and said, "Don't touch my tool," right? And so being the kid that I was, I kind of went into the corner and I was almost in tears. I mean, I just got reprimanded in front of all these people by the voice of Zozobra. And so of course he, fastened, did some more work on Zozobra's face, then put down the tool, and then he went to go tell another story. But this time when he finished the story, he looked around and he saw me in the corner and kind of started walking towards me. And I looked at him and he's like, "Well, where's my tool? Go get it." Right. And that was kind of his way of saying, let me do this. And so years and years of handing him back the tool, every once in a while he'd say, "Well, why don't you fasten this?" Or, "Do you know why I do it this way?" Or, "This is how you make the nose. This is how you do eyebrows," and so forth. And so little by little, he kind of taught me how to do Zozobra's face. And then when it came time where he just wasn't physically able to build Zozobra's face, he kind of passed the torch, if you will, to me. And so I still to this day have the honor of constructing Zozobra's face, which I think is pretty amazing.
That is. I've got to ask, have you started forgetting where you put your tools down when you tell your stories yet?
All the time, let me tell you. So, and then, what's funny is then I come home and I empty my pockets and I have tools and I have fasteners and I have staples and I have hog rings, and I'm just like kidding. Like I just, walked around for 20 minutes and I have I have an entire pocket full of hog rings, and I've just been looking for them for the last 20 minutes. So, yep, I think that's part of the curse. I think.
I'd say between that and your storytelling, you've stepped right into the role. It sounds like.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, to be compared with Harold in storytelling, that's a great honor.
I'm a captive audience, at least. I don't know about everyone who's going to listen to the episode, but we'll keep rolling along. What is the significance of changing the color of Zozobra's hair every year?
Yeah, one of the things is that, so Will Schuster, who was Zozobra's inventor, really, he was an artist, right? He and much more than that, he was a Renaissance man. He was a painter, a sculptor, a poet, an inventor, and so forth. And so, when Zozobra first started, we had this boogeyman that was about 20 feet tall, that was shirtless. He had, just these little pair of shorts around his waist, and his hands was tied behind his back, and he had a cigar in his mouth because in the 1920s, when you were going to execute somebody, you gave them a last smoke, right? And kind of as Zozobra kind of grew out of there, and he started growing both in stature and kind of height, in the 1930s, we see these very ghost-like Zozobras, but they are fat and bald and really, really fat. And, Schuster joked at the time that the 1930s were filled with so much gloom because of the Depression that Zozobra was just consuming this gloom, and that's how he got fat. But as we get to the end of the 1930s, Schuster kind of goes back and looks at Zozobra and says, he's a specter, and although, I want people to be they need to be frightened of him, and having this kind of, ghost-like character that looked something like Casper the Ghost, which was more cute than scary, he really thought, this is not the way to do it. And so all of a sudden in the early 1940s, you see these very slim and trim Zozobras, full head of hair, goblin-like faces, goblin ears, very scary. And so, he decided that's kind of where Zozobra needed to be. And so that evolution, gets to a point in the 1940s where it kind of gets, this is where, this is our template, if you will. Now, you can't build Zozobra the exact same way because, number one, different people are building him. And I will tell you that, the worst material to make something out of is chicken wire, shredded paper, and cloth, because they don't like to hold structure, right? And so, you get one side of the eyebrow perfect, and then you try to go and match it on the other side, and, it'll take you hours to kind of do that. So it's the absolute worst material. You can't just carve the Zozobra out. You have to actually form everything through cloth and paper. And so it's very difficult. And as Zozobra kind of goes through this evolution, Schuster would change his hair color. Schuster would change, what Zozobra was wearing. And by the time that we get to the point where Harold from the Kiwanis Club asked Schuster to take over Zozobra, he's now had a heart attack in the early 60s. He's now slowing down. And Harold goes to him and says, we will build a Zozobra for you. And so, with all due respect to Harold, who, if it wouldn't have been for him, probably Zozobra wouldn't have survived. But the first Zozobra that the Kiwanis built is horrendous. It is awful. And there's a photograph of Schuster standing next to Zozobra's head, and he can't even hide his disappointment in the photo, right? And so Schuster decides that he's going to give the Kiwanis Club a blueprint of what Zozobra should look like. And he feels like he needs to do that because even though he handed it to very, accountable people, they weren't artists. And so, what happens is the only thing that he allows them to do is change the color of Zozobra's hair. And he gives very detailed instructions on how Zozobra is supposed to look. And so we get into this era where we go back to the bow tie and the cummerbund, which feed into Zozobra's mythology that he's the special guest at this party that he's throwing for him. So of course he shows up in a tux. But because of that, Harold and Gus fulfill Schuster's wishes by the only thing that they ever change is going to be the hair color. And so everybody starts then, that's the question, what's Zozobra's hair color? What's Zozobra's hair color? And when we took over in 2012, one of the things that I felt is that we had a group of artisans who actually could go back and accomplish what Schuster wanted. And so, we took a page out of Zozobra's early history and we started our Decades project, in which the 10 years leading up to Zozobra, Zozobra wore different outfits. And, we got a little bit of flack last year. Zozobra stole Voldemort's cape and Voldemort's wand. People are like, is that Volt? No, it's not Voldemort, it's Zozobra, but he was able to do this. He stole Michael Jackson's Thriller jacket. He was able to steal John Travolta's Saturday Night Fever. And so that he was able to dress in the appropriate outfits from each of the decades. And, and we still changed the hair color. But now the biggest question is not just what color is the hair going to be, which we still get constantly, but now we also get what's the Zozobra going to wear. And that's really important to me, because when we do our art contest, and this year we had 600 kids who entered our kids art contest. And now Zozobra is being drawn with AirPods, and he's in jeans, and he has a backpack, and he has, Crocs on with the little Croc charms. And for me, that's really, really important, because I want the kids of our community to see Zozobra as this character that's relevant to their life. And when they take Zozobra and they put it into their own art, and they're dressing him in things that their peers are dressing or themselves, it shows me that bond is being recreated every time. So it's really something important.
Yeah, I'm happy to know that the community is still getting engaged. Maybe there'll be someone else who you can grab tools from.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've got to ask, of course, what's been your favorite outfit Zozobra's ever been in then, since you've been varying it a little bit now?
We tried to do, I think that that's a tough one, because, I'm like, oh, I like that. I will still have to say, though, when we did the 1940s, we really understood the impact of the 1940s as a decade, not only on the nation, but as the entire planet, and a turning point for the 20th century. And so, we took some time to teach kids about the Holocaust and what happened in the 1940s. And so I didn't want Zozobra to be Hitler, but I thought that there was never a more gloomy character. And so we borrowed one of Hitler's white suits and that fedora that he famously kind of wore. And, there was, we thought about putting a little mustache, or maybe, even a band around his arm. And we thought that was a little too much. So we thought we would be a little bit subtler. But to see Zozobra for the first time have a regular tie instead of his bow tie, and to be in this 3-piece white suit, and then for the very first time ever to wear a hat, which was this fedora, I think we really nailed it. I mean, he looked scary and sinister and classic. So really, I think that is probably my favorite.
I think that'd be a really hard design to pull off well without attracting all sorts of controversy, but it sounds like you guys did a great job with it.
Yeah, I think we walked the tightrope on that one, and thank God we didn't fall off either side. So. Yep.
Well, just keep rolling along. I know there's a similar thing they do to Zozobra in Albuquerque these days. I know you lend out his cousin. Has there been anywhere else that's kind of ripped off Zozobra, for lack of a better term? The best, we always think that the best form of flattery is plagiarism, right? And so, we know from documentaries that Burning Man got its start, that one of the creators of Burning Man came to Zozobra in the early 80s and really was inspired by what Zozobra kind of meant, decided that they would start something in the Nevada desert. And we all know how big Burning Man got, so we look at that as flattery, is that we're a Burning Man's, great grandfather, if you will. And then, yes, you mentioned Kukui, which is a figure that the South Valley in Albuquerque burns. And, and we're very happy with what the fact that, they give credit to Zozobra as kind of but it's also different, right? And that's something that's really important to us. We really don't want anyone to kind of copy what we're doing. And we've had this, we've gone back and looked historically, there are all these cultures around the globe that will burn something, Wicker Man, different places in Britain and in Australia that do these kind of things. What I think is interesting about that is that, these are demons, or these are things that people or people, political figures, or even, or religious figures in some cases, that people are burning. And what's so different about Zozobra is that the concept of Zozobra is that we create Zozobra.
right? So every time that we let ourselves down or we create gloom in our own lives or we create gloom into the world, we're putting out this negative energy, and that negative energy accumulates into Zozobra. And so what's great about Zozobra is rather than being this external political or religious figure or demon from mythology, Zozobra is a mirror to ourselves of what we're doing in our own lives and what we're doing in order to bring gloom into the world.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always think of is when my mom was overseas in Spain, she was in, I don't remember the specific town, but they had I guess one of their local notable political figures was known for walking his dog around town. Is that this little effigy of him with his little dog on the leash that they burned?
Oh my
so that's
God.
always been the connection I made. And then when I was doing research on your site, I learned.
I hope they didn't burn the dog. So
I assume I don't think they burned the actual dog, but I think the whole they'd fill him with firecrackers. And so I always thought it was festivals like that inspired Zozobra. But when we were talking, it sounds like it was more its own creation, which is I'm a New Mexican. I like to see us doing our own thing. So.
That's crazy. That's and again, like there is this inspiration from all different places, and of course, as humans, I think there's something innately human about us wanting to set things on fire. But I really do think that the Zozobra has a very different origin story and a very different meaning from some of those other festivals.
I completely agree from what research I've done. So. Well, let's just keep it rolling. So how will this Zozobra be different than the original and some of the others? If you could kind of walk us through a little bit how it's changed as an event over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things is that, we got a lot of flack for doing the Decades Project, right? Because not only did we dress Zozobra up in some of these outfits, but we also, we added contemporary music. We had a theme to it. People would dress up in the 1980s. The pageant, the Torchbearers theme would be a 1980s pop hit. The Gloomies would come out to 80s music last year, to 2000s. And so people were like, hey, you're getting away from the tradition. We're really not happy. And so, one of the things that we did when we decided to do the Decades Project, really a lot of soul searching. And what we felt was important was that there are check boxes, if you will, to the ritual in which the Zozobra has to burn, right? So there are certain things that have to happen. There are certain characters that are important to the mythology that have to do that, and their role has to be there. But that doesn't mean that we can't interpret their role in a different way, right? And so for right now, I'm dealing with, kids going to the movie theater, having augmented reality or being able to put on Google glasses, or the video games that they're playing, are hyper realistic. And so, for me, a tradition has to change in order to spark the imagination of the next generation. And so if I'm presenting something that looks like it's a production in 1980, then I'm going to lose our kids, right? And so, so this has been a big debate in our community as to whether or not this was the right path for Zozobra or the wrong path. I think that the popularity that Zozobra has gotten, and we talked a little bit about how the kids are now using their own influence in art and so forth. I think it's been overwhelmingly successful because we want Zozobra to be something that's relevant to them. So the plan for the 100th was always to be able to do all of these decades. So that way I mess with your mind and you don't remember what a traditional Zozobra is. So when we get to the 100th, I can do one of two things, which is I'm going to bring back a very traditional Zozobra. I'm going to have a very traditional show, but I'm going to incorporate parts of modern technology in a way that's a little bit different. So for instance, we had this drum recording from the 1950s that we used all the way till the 1980s that would announce the torchbearers' arrival. These are the citizens of Santa Fe who have come to come in and try to fight our little monster. And there's been this drum beat, and it was recorded in the 1950s, and it sounds like it's recorded in the 1950s, right? And it was, it was on a cassette tape, and so the quality is really, really bad. So after the 1980s, we decided we wouldn't use that anymore. But that melody is something that people kind of heard, and it was their signal that Zozobra was coming. And so this year we will be using that exact melody, but we have a Pueblo drum, which is the original drums that the recording was made off of, and we'll have one of our Native American brothers who is going to be drumming that. So again, we're going back to tradition because we're going to be using that beat, but we're doing it live and we're doing it with a drum And so there's these ways that you can go back to a tradition, but it still include, contemporary and modern technology. So we're going to be using drones this year to help tell some of those stories from the past and actually move the mythology and the story forward as we obviously check the box on our ritual and make sure that we're doing all the things that we're supposed to.
Well, sounds like it's going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yeah, I've been planning this for about 7 years. The fireworks, everything has been meticulously planned to really, and one of the things that I will say is that, I feel a great responsibility, not just to build a Zozobra, but the show has to be something that's quite exceptional. Schuster is writing in his diary in 1929 about how the black sky is a canvas and that Zozobra is this spectacle and that he's going to paint on that black canvas with fireworks, and that by using colors and sounds and Zozobra's movement, that you can create this reality for folks, right? And so, now that we're here, everyone's talking about these experiences and how you have augmented reality and all this stuff. And it's just amazing to me that Mr. Schuster, long before Disney, long before any of these things, he was talking about this in 1929. And so we are the heirs to that kind of brilliance. And so it really means a lot to us to make sure that we continue to do that. And so, I think that Schuster, being kind of the artist and the inventor that he was, I think he would love the idea of adding drones, because you can paint the sky now with fireworks, but we can also paint the sky with drones. And I think that those two things are going to be something that's going to be really amazing to see those two things working. The age-old, 1,000-year-old fireworks from China with these brand new, beautiful LED drones that can make these images in the sky.
Oh yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be a great show. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it, at least. I don't know how much you want to spoil of it, so.
No, and I think that, so what people are going to see is they're going to see, when we were kids, we went to Zozobra and it was like, oh, this is fun and we're burning this thing. And as I grew up and I started understanding the mythology of what Zozobra means, the fact that we create this 50-foot specter with our negative energy, and we send the townspeople to go kind of confront Zozobra, and he's like, yeah, whatever, and he scares them away. And then Zozobra steals our kids from us, devoids them of any kind of hope, and kind of turns them into his own minions to kind of take over the city. There's this interesting, really deep, mythos to how this all plays out. And so you're at a point where Zozobra is now going to win. He's going to come into the city of Santa Fe and just wreak havoc. And what the beauty of the story is that just as we created Zozobra through the gloom that we put out, there's a dichotomy to us as human beings when we're selfish, when we're loving, when we do good things, when we do things for others. That's an energy too. And so the citizens of Santa Fe are called upon to bring that positive energy to create the fire spirit. And the fire spirit is Zozobra's, arch nemesis. And so you have this 5-foot, for lack of a better term, Jack Frost character, an adolescent young boy who doesn't think that anything can harm him. And he has the arrogance to go up against Zozobra, even though Zozobra is 50 feet and he's only 5 feet, and so you have this David and Goliath kind of thing. And the fire spirit learns quickly that, when the torches came out, Zozobra lost a little bit of his power. And so the fire spirit understands that you can use fire to really start to suck off this negative energy from Zozobra and lessen his powers. And so the fire spirit starts kind of using fireworks around Zozobra. And, even as an insult to our monster is that the fire spirit is able to set off these waterfall fireworks on both sides of Zozobra to really tap out as much energy as possible. And what that is saying is that, I can even turn something like a waterfall that would be your savior in this situation, Zozobra, but I'm going to turn that waterfall into a firefall, and I'm going to tap out even more of your energy, so that way good can win out over darkness. And so Zozobra gets weakened to a point that the fire spirit's then able to kind of do him in. And that's something I think is really special about the event, is that, it's not the Titanic. The ship is not always going to sink. If the citizens of Santa Fe don't show up, if we don't release that positive and good feelings into the air, the fire spirit can't appear. The fire spirit has no energy, and Zozobra gets to win.
Yeah, speaking of the citizens of Santa Fe, then, how many actually show up to do their duty every year? And I don't know if you guys have like generalized number or what the
Yeah, we
trends
do.
look
We're
like.
really excited about this. The venue is capped off at about 65,000 people. That's what it can safely hold. And last year we were really happy because 39,000 of those 65,000 were from Santa Fe. Another 15,000 were from New Mexico. And then, the remaining are visitors from all over the world. And we welcome those visitors. We want to share this experience with them. But I hear this all the time. Oh, you've sold out. It's all tourists, blah, blah. No, that's not what our records show. We ask people to let us know where they're purchasing their ticket from. We have a map of all these things. And so we're able to pinpoint exactly where folks are. And, I will say that for a town of 80,000, if you have 40,000, that's half the town has showed up to be at your event. I mean, I think that's a pretty good,
That's a pretty good
I don't think
turnout.
any other event in town can say they have half of the town show up at their event.
I completely agree. Since the capacity is limited, I know in the past, like over COVID, you've televised in the event. Is there anywhere people will be able to catch it if they live in, I don't know, Germany?
Yeah, absolutely. So we partner with our ABC affiliate. It's called KOAT, and those are the call letters for it, KOAT. So KOAT.com, and they stream it live. And at first we were very scared as a club because we have to pay for this event, and this event is extremely expensive, especially in this day and age. There's several rings of security that have just exponentially exploded our budget, because it's our obligation to make sure that folks are safe when they attend our event. And so we were always worried about televising it because if we don't sell tickets, how do we pay for it? But Zozobra's popularity has been so much that we don't worry about that anymore. We're able to sell all those tickets, all the merchandise. And so, we understand that Schuster wanted to make sure that the entire community to come together and have this catharsis. And so it's really important for us for those people who can't walk or not mobile or can't make it to Santa Fe, are expatriates, that they can still participate in this amazing cultural event. And so television and the internet have really allowed that. And because the people of Santa Fe have supported us so much, we're not so much worried about the fact that we're now able to televise it and simulcast it on the net.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, like KOAT is just burned into my brain after so many years.
Yeah. They're definitely the big dogs here. In Santa Fe.
My mom that's the news my mom used to watch when I was growing up.
Yep.
So we're starting to run out of time. I know I only scheduled about 45 minutes for this, so I don't want to keep you any longer. So I only have about 2 more questions.
Sure.
The first of the 2 is the easiest, red or green?
Red. Red. So definitely red.
Yeah. I think we can agree to disagree there. But it also depends on what you're cooking.
Okay, I'll give you that. It's interesting because we actually have in our club we have something called Happy Bucks, and so you give a buck when you're happy. And we've started this red versus green, contest, right? And it's great because it just raised so much money because the people on either side, and we have Christmas too. We have some Christmas.
I was gonna ask.
So it's great because it's been a great fundraiser for our club internally.
Yeah, that just sounds. I can't think of anything more New Mexican than a fundraiser around Red, Green, or Christmas.
Yep, it works.
Yep. And then for my last question, is there anything you'd like to point my listeners to? I know the Burns Zozobra website exists. The person I've been corresponding on your media team has given me some links to your social media. I plan to include all that in the show notes, but I don't know if there's any other resources you want to point my listeners to.
Yeah, I would definitely say the website is a really great opportunity to look at the history, to see where the net proceeds from Zozobra go. We're an all volunteer organization. So when after we're able to pay our bills, all of the excess money goes to nonprofits in our community that support kids. So that's something that's really, really important to us. The mythology, learn about the mythology and the history. And so the website can point that out to you. We will be coming out with a 100th documentary. And so when we have a link for that, I'll share that with you, Michael, so that way you can include that. I think that it's about a 40-minute documentary, and it will really give your listeners a really great insight with some really great animation and really great photos and videos, and give them just a different perspective. And then the other thing is that, I hope that your listeners at some point will come out. It's always, number one, hard to describe the Zozobra in any kind of medium, whether you're telling a story about it or even showing from video. It just never gives the event the right opportunity. And so I would hope that they would look at this. Santa Fe is an amazing place to visit. And so I hope that someday that they would come and join us and burn their gloom. And I'm personally inviting all of your listeners.
I hope some of them are able to make it out too. I have to say, Santa Fe is my favorite city in New Mexico. My hometown's my first, so I got to give that, as far as towns go, hometowns.
You got to give shout out to them. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
But Santa Fe is such a fun city, so. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you again for bearing with me through all the technical errors I had last time. Thank you so much for, I didn't know what I was going to get when I just shot a random email out to the Kiwanis Club, and then they said I should talk to you, and I'm hoping this will make a great episode my listeners enjoy.
Well, thank you to you for reaching out to us. Thanks for highlighting our little monster. And, it's so important, the work that we do, because there's so many of these beautiful stories and culture. And thank you for giving, a voice to New Mexico and the stuff that's going on here. We have such an amazing state, and it's great when other folks can learn about that and learn about our history and culture and participate in it. So, Michael, thank you for what you do.
Yeah, no one else was doing it, so I figured I should throw my hat in the ring.
Fantastic, man.
Thank you again so much for talking with me, Ray. I'll let you go now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'd like to extend my thanks to the Kiwanis Club of Santa Fe for helping with my research of the episode, as well as to Ray for being willing to work through all the technical issues that I ran into. Again, I've linked to all the Zozobra social medias and their website in the show notes. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends. Leave a review on your podcast app of choice if it lets you. Since I'm a Luddite and don't use social media, word of mouth and reviews are the only way the show spreads. We have a website located at engineeringfire.org. That's spelled ENGINEERINGFIRE.org, where I have a link in the header for podcast resources, including pictures, companion posts, my bibliography, and the transcripts of each show. We have an email you can submit comments and questions to at michael@engineeringfire.org. The intro music is Desperados by Frank Schroeder and sourced from filmmusic.io. The outro music is NeoWestern from Kevin McLeod of Incompetech. Links to all things mentioned are present in the show notes and at the website. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.